Welcome back to the No Limits Pop-Up Podcast, this week featuring West Coast O.G. John Murray. We talked about the glory days of the West Coast tournament scene and a whole lot more. This is one of my very favorite podcasts. Ladies and gentlemen, here he is, John Murray. I have to give you your props because you're responsible for one of my favorite things on the internet, Old Tackle Tuesday. Mm-hmm. Love Old Tackle Tuesday. So how long ago did you start doing that?
Seemed like it was probably 5 years ago now. Yeah. I started it just because, I'm an old guy. I fished since the 70s is when I really started fishing. So I got a lot of lures, especially stuff that, more Western-based stuff that I had, and people never seen stuff like that. Yeah. So sort of that's how it started. I want to show them, hey, this is, when the tube. I'm like, no, it was called a Gets It. Yeah. And got Bobby Garland made it. Yeah. And that's what it is. But yeah, it's sort of funny trying to tell the stories, a little bit of them. Now it's just I get lures from people, and Edwin Evers even offered to send me some stuff. It's sort of cool.
I saw one smacking shad, right? There was one before that was old Buckeye shad. Is that right?
Yep.
The lipless bait.
The lipless bait. And this was the first handmade. This is the first handmade version. It was made out of some weird material. And actually, an older gentleman in Spring City wanted to get some Westy Worms from me. So he brought one over. He brought one over. He goes, hey, you ever seen that? I go, never seen it in my life.
That's crazy.
So I put it on there, and I guess they're still making them. And you hear the backstory then from the people, So, I mean, I enjoy doing it. But, you just those are some of the ones that I really wasn't involved with. Yeah. I've always skewed it to stuff I knew about. Yeah. So. Yeah. But it's fun to do whatever I find.
It's pretty awesome. Like I enjoy it a lot. Yep.
Yeah, I get more people to ask about that when I go to a show or something than anything, just because people can relate to it. My dad has. I've seen those. Yeah. My grandpa. I'm like, hey, I'm not that old. All right.
What is the one super what you define as an old school bait that you still use?
I guess the hula grub. That was one that Bobby Garland made the spider jig, and then Gary Yamamoto turned it into a hula grub. Yeah. And it's something I still use. I throw a jig, when I throw a football jig, I'm probably putting some sort of Yamamoto trailer on it now. But that double tail with a skirt is still catches just as many bass. Yeah. And I had a lot better colors back in the day. Now they don't have as much because they put all their money into the Senkos and stuff like that. Yeah. But that's a bait that I'll always have.
Yeah, that's a staple for those desert lakes too.
Yeah.
I mean, everyone had that with the 1 ounce football head. And
I remember going to the Hudson River back in the early 90s and flipping a regular jig like everyone did, and I couldn't catch it. I put a pumpkin, Bobby Garland skirt and just started killing them. So, I've always used Western stuff out here. Yeah. Because back then, nobody had it. No internet, no communication. You couldn't dial up Tackle Warehouse and get stuff. Right. So I brought it out here.
So those fish have literally never seen it probably.
Yeah. Right. And you do, as you're a tournament fish, you look for an edge if you can find it. Right. Totally. And that's really what it was back in the day.
Yeah. You mentioned the Westy Worm. That's another one too that I think of you when I think of that. So.
And I think that started it for me because, the double hook, when I first saw a Westy Worm, when I think I was 14 years old. I drew a guy at Swirl Lake in a night tournament. He had he had a bunch of them in a package, all in packages, and they're blue, super float worm, 2 hooks rigged. And I'm like, this guy's a beginner. Yeah. This guy doesn't know what he's doing, right?
You're like, oh no, bad.
And I had a Texas rig blue ringworm. I'm thinking I'm a pro. I'm 14. Yeah. This guy destroyed me. Yeah. Destroyed me. He caught 15 bass. Finally, he gave me one. Yeah. And so from that point on, I became a Westy Worm addict in Arizona. Yeah. The U.S. Open as a 20-year-old and 21-year-old, I got top 3 throwing a Westy Worm, bright red Westy Worm on Lake Mead. The clearest lake, throwing the brightest worm you could throw. Wow. Yeah. And I was catching suspended fish. The guys right now would love it for forward facing, but we used to pull up on points and just throw out into the deep water off the points because we knew the fish suspended off there. They didn't live deep; they just were suspended. And that bright red Westy Worm, they'd run over and grab it, and then they'd grab that back hook. Yeah. And you'd get them on that back hook. Yeah. And the second year, I think it was like 1986, Roland Martin was going to fly out. He was the Jacob Wheeler, the Kevin Van Dam at the time. Yeah. Yep. He called me. He goes, John, I'm going to come out as a non-board. I'm going to go practice with you one day. I'm like, awesome. It's rolling money.
He just told you what he's going to do.
I pick him
I've
up.
never heard this story before.
So I'm driving to the lake with him. I pick him up to the casino. We're driving to the lake, and he goes, John, I'm going to prove today that he was using a little single tail grub, probably Yamamoto grub or something before that, will outproduce your Westy Worm. I'm like, cool. We run out to the jip beds, and I pull up my first point and make a long cast, got one. He fishes around nothing. I go to my next point, I got one. And I go, I'm catching one, I'm leaving.
He wasn't using a helicopter lure though.
No, he was on a little grub. And he's like, this is, and literally it was 5 points. He goes, give me one of those.
Yeah.
I ended up second in that tournament. He ended up in the top 10 as a non-boater. Caught most of his fish on a Westy Worm. The ones that I gave him were little red Westy Worm. So I always used to tease, when I did classes back then, I like, if I can convince Roland Martin to use a Westy Worm, I can convince you to use a Westy Worm.
So he fishes a non-boater. That's pretty wild.
In fact, the U.S. Open was 300 guys, and it didn't matter. I took my boat my first year when I was 18 years old. I never got to use it. I drew a famous guy the first day, and we all did bad, and I never got to use my boat. And that's the way it was.
Was
guys
that
would break down.
So coin flip thing, or like
coin flip, and
really?
You get first half. I'd taken the boat, but I get first half. It was a nightmare. Compared to now, because you could be on really good fish and never get to them.
Right.
And so key was getting that first day, so you could, hey, I'm in top 10. Right. You got to go with me
because everyone's going to say they're on fish.
Right.
So, yeah.
Of course.
Right. So it's but guys would fly in from Florida, practice with me, practice with other guys, and then fish the tournament. And he had just as much right for half the day.
Right.
He made a top 10 fishing on-boater.
Wow.
That's some trivia for you right there.
Yeah.
That's some, those old U.S. Open days that, if you judge fishing, there's nothing like those first U.S. Open. They were in July. End of July on Lake Mead. 120, 115 every day. Yeah. Right? We had 3 official practice days. Think we had a day off. Then they had 4 competition days. Every day was a boat for big fish. Every day. Yeah. So there's 300 guys, whatever there was, every day. So you drew a guy, flip a coin. You didn't know if you're going. You fish your day. I think it was 7:30, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock at night. You had to be in the auditorium for the next day's partner and a press meeting. So you'd fish all day. You'd leave at 3:30 in the morning in Vegas. We were in the Tropicana range. Drive all the way to Lake Mead, fish all day, come back. You had to be in that meeting at 7 o'clock and get your partner. And it would take like 2 hour and a half to do all your partner pairings and do a press conference for the top 5. And you had to sit there. And if you weren't there, it was a 1 pound penalty, right?
No way.
Gary Klein was going to be leading the U.S. Open in early 80s, and he got a flat tire. Yeah. And didn't get there in time and got a 1 pound. He was in third going in it was serious. Wow. And for 4 days now. You talk about tired.
That's a marathon.
The heat. Guys, Roland got flown out of there on a helicopter once. Heat stroke. A lot of guys did.
So it's more of like a mental test too, like physical mental test.
You'd start training early in the summer, and we'd make a Gatorade, like a big cooler, and have a pipe, like a hose coming out, so when you run, so you could just suck the water Gatorade
like
out.
Backpack.
The guys had all that stuff, because it was like a major deal. Now, they got in October, and you get a co-angler. It's not
still hot,
like
but not like that. Yeah.
It is nothing. October's nice, but that was the true test. And Rick Clown will attest to that. That was the toughest tournament there ever was.
You gotta clear me up on some math here. So do you know all these numbers? I hope you do. How many boats and trucks did you win in Western events?
Well,
do you know that number?
Yeah, we did. I won 31 boats, and then I won 7 trucks and cars, because a couple of them were cars. So, yeah. And back then, we fished for boats or trucks every weekend. Yeah. It seemed like 2 or 3 times a month. Wow. So, and I'd fish from New Mexico all the way up to Washington State. My schedule was just, I didn't really follow circuits that much. I would follow the One Bass Trail later. Yeah. But if they gave away a boat, I was there. Yeah. And so you fish for that. And they were $20,000 boats. Fully rigged boat back then was $22,000. Right. It wasn't like now.
Still a lot of money then, though.
Yeah, but that was, to win one. That's how you judge your year. Oh, I won 3 boats this year. I did good. Or I won a couple boats. You couldn't win enough money getting second, third, and fourth living. But if you won a couple boats of the year, you were golden.
Is it true that people would like know you're going to win boats? So basically, it would be like, hey, your next one you win.
I pre-sell them.
Like that's kind of the but like people were like, next one you win, I'm going to buy it. Like they kind of.
I had guys like that, and I also had guys that like the West Coast Championship was a 20-foot Ranger with a 225. It was like the big boat.
Yeah.
And I won it one year, but I'd have guys go, I want that boat. So I not only if I don't win it, I'd go to the guy that won it. He'd say, hey, I got that sold right now if you want it.
Yeah.
The guy's got 25,000 cash right over here, and they give you the dang boat. So you be with your boat, and here's your boat. So you're not going to leave it there. So it wasn't like a certificate. It wasn't like it was, there's your boat. Take it home or do something. So I sold a lot of them, and I had guys come right at hey, I got 16.5 cash right here. See ya. Bye. And I did that. I would not trying to
good old days
take them home and try to get an extra couple thousand because you never would.
Right. And then you have to figure out how to get there.
Right. So it was
Washington
always
State,
and there was also Spokane Valley that one. He took my boat once when I didn't sell. I mean, there was different people that helped a lot. But it was sort of fun, because you could pre-sell.
That's cool.
Did you have a top 2 or 3 fisheries that you won the most boats from? Where did you win the most boats from?
I think Meade probably the most, and then the Delta. I won 4 on the Delta, and I think 6 or 7 on Meade. I can't remember, but those were the 2 biggest. And then, but I was always proud. I won 3 or 4 on Elephant Butte. I won quite a few on Havasu. I won one up in Spokane on the Tri-Cities. I mean, I spread myself out. I was, I know Gary Dobbins won a lot of boats, but he won them all in Clear Lake and the Delta. Won a U.S. Open later. But I was always proud. I didn't really matter. Yeah,
Elephant Butte. I haven't heard of that place in a long time.
It's a premier fishery.
And
premier fishery back and even before that when it filled up the first time. I mean, there was 10. I caught 10 pounders out of that place. It was some big fish.
Yeah, that was kind of the origins of the drop shot. The first time I ever heard about it.
It was Sage Ikeda. He still fishes to this day. Comes over here. Showed Dennis Hoy, and they did the TV show, and
it was like late 90s or 98.
98. And I remember looking at it going, well, that's dumb. And then it became, it's a small fish. Everyone's like, you just throw it out of Meade, you catch 100 fish, but you won't catch a 2 pounder.
Right.
I go, I'll just stick with my jig. And the tipping point to me was like a year later. I had a tournament on Pleasant. It was a big tournament, and I pull up on my spot, and I'm dialed, throwing my jig, make a couple casts, miss a couple. And Brett Height, who was a disciple, he fished with Aaron Martens. So he'd actually got the exact rig from Aaron, pulled up and caught a limit under my boat on a drop shot. So here I am. I'm trying to figure out how to tie, a hook and get a weight, and I ended up catching some that day. But then Brett, and Aaron basically detailed what you needed. And that was the difference right there. I mean, he caught a limit under my boat on throwing the jig. And he won the tournament.
Yeah, my first experience with the drop shot was with you. I drew you when I was in high school.
Right, and that was the exact rig that Brett and Aaron and all of us did. The little tungsten weight, the People's Worm, the 4-inch People's Worm, the small I used a little different hook. I didn't use the rebarb as much.
Right.
But 6-pound line. Back then we didn't have braid.
Yeah, it was the G-lock hook.
The little G-lock hook. And that became I got that hook because of the smallmouth.
Right.
Because you couldn't keep a smallmouth on a little hook, but the G-lock hook was the best thing.
I remember that. That was cool.
But and it was like cheating. Because no one fished deeper than 20 feet. You go out 40, 50 feet, find deep brush, drop it in there, and just catch them. But it was fun.
Tell that story from your perspective, though.
They used to have BFLs on the West Coast. Which was great back then, and I was in high school. This was 2001.
Lived in Vegas.
I'd lived in Vegas, traveled with some guys, and remember the first tournament of the year, I drew him. So my buddies that I was staying with, no way. How did you draw this?
Were you stoked or intimidated?
Oh, I was like so excited about it. And then I'd never been to the lake, never drop shot fished anything, and his home lake, doing something like he said that nobody was really doing. And if I remember right, I got 5th, and I think you were first or second.
I got second.
Okay.
Guy beat me on another spot. One of Aaron's spots, a guy beat me on, but we caught him off that one ramp, and I sort of felt bad for him because I'm just dialing it in with the front graph, and I'm And he never fished for it. So we literally went to a spot that was not going to help me, and he whacked a limit real quick.
Yeah, and you gave me a rod to use too.
Yeah, I mean, it was a pretty specific deal. It wasn't just tie this on.
So long ago, you were video game fishing, like 20 plus years ago.
That's what everyone, Skeet laughs at me. He goes, dude, you were video game before, and you can't do this live scope. I go, it doesn't jive with me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That jived with me. I didn't have to stare at the screen because I could look around and then see what had happened in the last 20 seconds or a minute. Live scope, you can't take your eyes off. And you can't have your rod in the water. I mean, you got to have it out. So it's a different mentality. But I used a paper graph before anybody did up front because all they had was flashers. No one put it, the paper graph was like $1,000. It was way more expensive. And I put one on my back, but I put one up front. And you could see the fish. And I mean, it was, we got guys in Missouri used to call me, hey, what's the deal with that deal? Because they were fishing Table Rock. But all our fish in Arizona were 20 to 60 feet deep. So you needed that stuff.
So you're, one thing that we've noticed about you over the years is that whenever we've done tips or whatever, you have kind of a creative mind. Like you come up with ideas and thoughts. And they're very kind of teaching oriented. So you guide some, and you're very good at like just explaining things to people. So is that something that you focus on, or is that just your personality?
Well, I was going to be a teacher. Both my parents were teachers. Really? I was going to be a teacher. So when I actually was going to Glendale Community College, getting my associate's degree, they asked me to teach bass fishing. So I became the bass fishing instructor at my college that I'm going to.
Right.
It became the largest non-credit class in the school. I mean, I was having, they had to move me to the auditorium. We were getting 300, 400 people for a class. And then I added a crappie, and I added another college, Mesa Community called me and said, hey, can you do it over here? So I was teaching 3 different classes for almost, I think it was 15, 18 years. Wow. And so it was all teaching. It was all, most of them, I tried like the crappie class and stuff. I tried to get a class so you can talk to people. I didn't want lectures. Yeah. But until the internet, that's the only way people learn how to fish. And like Brett Height and his dad, Brett was 13, was in my class. I mean, really, people that, anybody, it's sort of funny. We're all in those fishing classes in Arizona for years. So that was my basis, try to keep it simple. Don't make it intimidating. Here's a simple list of lures. And that was the thing. Here's the list of lures. You don't need 75 million of them. You just need this basics, cover this. Yeah. And that was my background, is from teaching.
All right. So do you still consider yourself a John Murray West Coast angler, or are you now John Murray Tennessee angler?
No, I'm a West Coast guy.
You're West Coast guy.
There's no doubt. I could go, if I could make a living fishing West Coast tournaments again, I'd do it. Yeah. Lake Mead, I mean, I miss so bad. And when I go to Lake Mead, I'm so excited. I took TJ out to the U.S. Open in Mojave. Mojave's a fun lake, but I don't have the history there that I did on Mead. Yeah. And he's just like, Dad, I'm like, this is this is the way I like to fish, So I definitely am a West Coast guy still.
Yeah, and you lived there for a while, right, in Boulder City?
Yeah. So back in the day, Byron and I had a house. He and I split a house in Boulder City. I still have one in Phoenix, but I'd keep a boat and a truck there. I'd keep a boat and truck in Arizona. If I wanted to go to New Mexico, if I wanted to go to Northern Cal, we'd go that back way through Reno, and I mean, I'd be in Shasta, Clear. I mean, I wasn't married, didn't have kids, so I didn't have the obligations. Right. But it was a pretty crazy life.
You consider the characters probably that came through that area, that house, your orbit at that time. You've already mentioned Height. You've mentioned the late great Aaron Martens, Byron Velvick, but there had to have been a couple dozen guys.
Timmy Klinger, he's won a ton out there. I mean, he was the little kid hanging out at our house. Ish, back when he was skinny, used to hang out there. I go, who's a little skinny guy? Ish. That's what I remember, and he was so serious about his fishing, and but a lot of, tons of guys that, eventually fished out here. We hung out with. We called it the money house. We won a lot of money out of that. Yeah. We owned it 4 years. I won. I bought that house to win the U.S. Open because I'd got second like twice or 3 times. And in the 4 years I owned it, I won it twice out of those. So it was like it was the money house. I mean, it served its purpose. I was out there. I mean, there wasn't anything on Mead I didn't know.
Dang. Do you remember your first meeting with Aaron Martens.
I do. I mean, we used to tease him because Aaron would kick all our butts when he first came on tour.
Yeah.
He came to a big team championship at Meade with his mom. Mm-hmm. He led the first day, and the second day I ended up beating him. I got second. I think he got fourth. But throughout the year, he would just kill us shaking a worm. Shaking a worm. He's young. He's 17, 18. Yeah. He was just driving. And Byron and I, when it got to spawning season, we'd kill him. Every time. We just destroy it. Yeah. And so we're sort of cocky, you know. Yeah. We were like the dudes. Yeah. And at one time, we were fishing Havasu, and there was a 3-pounder on a buoy, and he's fishing by the buoy. He's shaking a worm up the hill, and he hadn't been bit. And I've been calling all day. He moved off, and I caught the fish. You know, he didn't ever see it. And after that tournament, we made the hugest mistake of our lives. We said, Aaron, if you learned how to sight fish, you'd be dangerous. What do you mean? I said, dude, I caught a fish under your boat. I said, I followed you in a cove at Meade, and I caught every fish. Yeah. I mean, he'd shaken them off, shaking a worm, but he had no idea. What do you mean? I said, and after that, it was over.
Yeah.
We were no longer the best.
Look what you did to yourself.
Yeah, very big mistake. But that's the way, you know, that's the way he was. I took him Carolina rigging fishing on Lake Pleasant in 70, 80 feet of water. Yeah. And I catch an 8 and a 7 in the first 15 minutes, and I start, you know, and he got involved in my boat, and the dude caught like a 9, an 8, and a 7 after that. I'm like, did I just teach him how to Carolina rig fish now? Not smart. Yeah.
I remember back in the day when George Kramer used to write this is for Fishing and Hunting News, the California's top 40 bass names. You guys remember that? Mm-hmm. Yeah, like and he would come up with the names and so forth, and everybody got all fuzzed up if they weren't number one and so forth. I mean, I miss those days. Like George stopped writing that 10 years ago, 15 years ago probably. But I remember that was a big deal. I mean, even living up in Washington, all kinds of controversy. Yeah, absolutely.
And George would do that for
absolutely.
Yes.
I remember when Clausen first made the top 5. He won at Clear Lake. Guy from Washington, didn't live in California. Came down and had some success in some tournaments in California, and George put him in the top 5.
Oh, yeah.
People were mad about that. I remember that. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's. A lot of crazy stuff out there. You know, Andre Moore used to live out there. Mm-hmm. You know, Clausen lived in Phoenix for a while. I mean, you know, Mark Tyler lived in Phoenix. I mean, a lot of guys lived down there and moved down there. So there's a lot of, you know, we didn't really feel like we needed to fish out east. Right. You know, we had our own little world. Yeah. And then when ESPN bought Bass is when I said, I'm going to move back and start fishing back east.
Yeah, right. So if you could choose a couple 3 fisheries on the West Coast that are not the well-knowns, and let's not talk about Clear Lake, Delta, Havasu, the places that everybody knows. What are a couple 3 that you would love to have a tournament on?
Roosevelt Lake in Arizona, obviously. Mm-hmm. Apache Lake in Arizona is my absolute favorite. Mm-hmm. Those 2 are big time. And then in California, you know, probably Trinity. It's just
nobody knows about Trinity.
Nobody knows about
Trinity. Gets all the attention.
Yeah. And it's probably better because if those spots got into Trinity, it would ruin them. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But I mean that or Berryessa, either one of those. You know, those are.
What about like the Motherlode Lakes? There's a handful of lakes up in the Motherlode.
I won a term on McClure back in the day. I won it in 125 feet of water spooning, and everyone's like, "There's no way." I'm like, "There's spots." And they're eating kokanee. Yeah. And you'd catch 5 kokanee and you'd catch a 2-pound spot. 5, you know. And big ones, you know, Don Pedro, all those lakes had huge fish in them back then because of the kokanee. Yeah. Now I haven't fished those in 20-some years.
Yeah. How much experience do you have at like Potholes in Washington or Moses Lake or?
Those would be good ones.
Those are I've heard great stories.
Yeah.
You know.
Phenomenal.
Lake Washington.
I've not. You know, they didn't have any big money tournaments. The only one that has Tri-Cities. That was the only one that had big money tournaments back then. You know, and that was sort of a freak show when they announced that. I'm like, what is this place? You know,
the other Roosevelt up there in Washington,
really
good right now. I mean, it's 20 pounds isn't even a check right now.
Right, Washington's always had great fishing. You know,
some of the Idaho fisheries.
Mm-hmm. The funny story to me, when I was 18, there was a big team. You know, they did the biggest thing was the federation deals, where all the states come together. And the first Western regional they ever had was going to be on Lake Powell. It was out of Bullfrog. It was up north, and you know, Arizona was favored to win. You know, we were the studs. New Mexico was a big team because they lived there, and Washington and Oregon came down and kicked all our butts. Reno, Pelletier, Double Shot,
Reno,
all those guys. Reno won the whole thing. Yeah. I mean, he destroyed us, and we're like, who are these guys?
Yeah.
And I'd talk to Reno in practice, you know, I'm 18. I don't know
Sure.
that I'm. And he's, I might catch a fish or two. He just destroyed us. So the good fishermen were up there.
Yeah.
That was in 80s. That was early 80s. Yeah.
So I mean, clearly the numbers just based on geography is like most of the guys who fish all the professional levels southeast. That's just the biggest population. But there's a bunch of you guys from the west that the diversity of the fisheries there has definitely helped you guys a lot.
That was it. You know, if you catch fish in Northern Cal between the Delta, Clear Lake, Shasta, and whatever else, you can catch them anywhere. So that was really the proving ground for a lot of guys. Skeet, I mean, that's where he cut his teeth, you know, and that's where I met Skeet living in his truck. You know, that was my stories. Guy lived in his truck. I'm like, dude, you can stand on the floor of my room. You know, it's 100 degrees. We're at Lake Nacimiento. And 30 years later, now we're roommates still.
How about that? Yeah.
Cool.
And he's a multimillionaire and I'm not. But hey, he had nothing then.
Gosh, we can talk about stuff like this all day long.
I know.
All day long. Yeah. So do you have like an endless supply of things for Old Tackle Tuesday?
I don't.
Safe to say? Really? You don't?
I don't. I've probably done them before. You know, some couple of them. But I did it so long ago, it doesn't seem to matter when I bring some of the stuff back. But I don't. It's like when Edwin offered. I said, I'll probably pull them up on it. You know?
That's super cool.
Is there anything you're not going to put out there because they're still working or anything?
No, I pretty much put everything out there. Just 'cause, you know, it's a different world now. All you need is a jig head and a minnow. All that stuff is by the wayside, you know.
Tomorrow is Tuesday. No, today's Tuesday.
Today's Tuesday.
Are we going to put something out today or no?
I did not. I did not today. Because I have to take the picture. I have to think about it. Picture,
Sure.
And I didn't.
It's all right.
I had some earlier, but I used them. I haven't been doing it weekly, especially during tournament season.
Sure, right.
It's more off season.
Right.
We'll have to look around anytime we go anywhere. Find the old tackle.
You find something
Old
cool.
Tackle Tuesday.
Sure. Those people love it. They do love it. And I don't care what I found, people have it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Right.
So I've never even heard of that. Someone's got the whole story. The owners have texted me every time of the company, even if I don't know them.
Yeah.
John, it's been good to have you here for the Old Pop-Up Podcast. Yeah, let's do it again soon.
Absolutely. Sounds good.
Yeah, good time. Thanks for coming.
Thank you for tuning in to the MLF No Limits Pop-Up Podcast. Be sure to tune in the following weeks as we connect with MLF pros Cliff Crochet, Matt Steffen, Mark Daniels Jr., Zach Burge, and Fred Boom Boom Rubanis. And hey, if there's a guest you'd like to hear from, just drop me an email, nolimitspodcast@majorleaguefishing.com.